The nest looks completely normal. Two pale eggs, a yellow warbler sitting on them in the warm morning light, a thicket of willows along a slow river in Kansas. From any distance, this scene belongs in a nature documentary about spring. But look at the eggs more carefully. One of them is slightly larger than the other, slightly off in color, slightly wrong in a way that's hard to name, but impossible to unfeel once you see it. The warbler doesn't notice. She shifts her weight, tucks the eggs beneath her, and keeps sitting. And somewhere beyond the tree line, already gone, is the bird that put that egg there. She will never come back. She doesn't need to. She has already done everything she intends to do for this child, and it took her less than a minute. It hasn't raised a single chick in its entire species history, and it is thriving. The brown-headed cowbird is not endangered, not declining, not struggling. It has expanded its range across North America, colonized new territories, and successfully reproduced at a scale most bird species cannot match, all without building a single nest, incubating a single egg, or feeding a single hungry mouth. The animal doing the least parenting is, by most ecological measures, winning the parenting game. That contradiction demands explanation, and the explanation is stranger, more calculated, and more unsettling than most people expect when they first hear the name of this bird and assume it's just an interesting quirk of nature. The female cowbird wakes before dawn, not to forage, not to call. She moves quietly through dense cover, watching which shrubs other birds enter, tracking which branches show the disturbance of nest building, waiting. She is doing reconnaissance. When she identifies a suitable nest, a small songbird, freshly built, containing one or two new eggs, she waits for the host parents to leave. She lands inside the nest for roughly 40 seconds. She lays one egg. She removes one of the host's eggs in her bill, swallowing it or dropping it on the ground below. Then she leaves without sound. The host returns to a nest that looks almost identical to the one it left. Almost. That single displaced egg is already cooling on the soil, and the cowbird is already scanning the next territory, the next nest, the next 40 seconds of commitment. Inside that nest, the clock runs differently than the host bird knows. Cowbird eggs are incubated for a shorter period. They hatch 1 to 2 days before most host species. That head start is not accidental. The cowbird chick arrives into the nest first, already larger, already demanding. When the host parents return with food, the chick that calls loudest, gapes widest, and positions itself most aggressively gets fed first. Cowbird chicks are built for this competition. Their begging calls are louder. Their bodies grow faster. The host chicks, hatching into a nest where the food is already being redistributed to a stranger, fall behind quickly. In documented cases, photographed, measured, confirmed, the host parents continue delivering food to the one mouth that responds most powerfully, while their own chicks grow still and thin beneath the chaos of a sibling that was never supposed to be there. One female cowbird can lay between 40 and 70 eggs in a single breeding season. Hold that number next to what it represents in practice. 40 to 70 separate nests, 40 to 70 host families, 40 to 70 chicks raised by birds who received no benefit from that relationship and had no knowledge they were in one. The cowbird achieves this scale by removing from reproduction everything that makes it expensive. No nest means no territory to defend, no construction energy, no fixed location that predators can find. No incubation means no weeks of vulnerability while sitting still. No chick rearing means the female's body is free, continuously, to produce and place more eggs. The cowbird has not just adopted a different strategy, it has restructured the cost of reproduction by pushing every line item onto a different species' balance sheet. Now here's where it stops being merely fascinating and starts being genuinely uncomfortable. Some host bird species have evolved the ability to recognize cowbird eggs. They learn to detect the slightly different coloring and the marginally larger shell, the subtle wrongness. And when they do identify the foreign egg, some of them eject it from the nest. A rational response, a reasonable defense. But researchers studying cowbird behavior placed monitoring cameras on nests where they had experimentally removed cowbird eggs to see what happened next. In a significant portion of cases, documented clearly, repeated across study sites, the female cowbird returned. She did not lay another egg. She destroyed the nest. She dismantled the structure, punctured the remaining eggs, and left the host family with nothing. The researchers named it the Mafia Hypothesis, and the name holds. If the idea that a bird enforces compliance through retaliation just shifted something in how you see animal behavior, give the video a like. It helps more people find stories like this, because the logic of what follows is even harder to absorb. The cowbird was not protecting a lost egg. That egg was already gone. She was punishing the act of resistance. The destroyed nests represent a feedback loop. Hosts that eject the egg lose everything. Hosts that accept it lose most of their own young, but raise at least one chick to fledging. Over generations, in some populations, the math has produced a behavioral shift. Acceptance has become, for some host species, the less catastrophic option. The cowbird has not just exploited a gap in behavior, it has shaped behavior in the species around it through the application of consequence. The researchers conducting these studies set up controlled nests near cowbird territories, carefully staged with one cowbird egg and 2 host eggs, then filmed what happened when they removed the cowbird egg while the female was in view range. The footage shows her returning, not immediately, but within 1 to 3 days. She moves through the nesting area in the same quiet reconnaissance pattern she uses when laying. She lands. She inspects. When the nest has been tampered with, her behavior changes. She works methodically, pulling at the structure, piercing what remains. She leaves. The host birds return to an empty site. What makes this footage difficult to dismiss as coincidence is the specificity of it. She returns to the tampered nests at significantly higher rates than to undisturbed ones, a pattern that holds across multiple host species and multiple geographic sites. Here's the detail that researchers found most strange when they began tracing the cowbird's developmental biology. The chick raised by a warbler, fed warbler food, hearing warbler songs from the moment it hatches, does not become a warbler. It cannot. But it also receives no cowbird instruction. No cowbird parent teaches it how to find a mate, how to recognize its own species, what calls to make during breeding season. And yet, when the following year arrives, the young cowbird finds other cowbirds. Studies using acoustic playback revealed that cowbird chicks carry an innate sensitivity to cowbird song, a recognition signal that operates beneath the layer of learned behavior. The host family raises the body. Something written into the biology carries the identity. The cowbird has outsourced everything that can be outsourced and kept only what cannot be given away. Not every host species is losing this arms race. Some birds have developed egg recognition so precise they can detect a cowbird egg even when researchers artificially dye cowbird eggs to match the host clutch. House finches, American robins, and some warbler populations show rejection rates that continue climbing across measurable generations, a real-time evolutionary countermove, visible in data collected decades apart. But these are species with long exposure to cowbird pressure, populations that have had generations to build a response. The problem sharpens where cowbirds have moved into new range, old-growth forest fragments, recently disturbed woodland edges, where species encounter them for the first time, with no counter-adaptation in place. Kirtland's warbler and the black-capped vireo both faced serious population pressure, not only from habitat loss, but from cowbird parasitism arriving into ecological relationships that had no history of it and no defense ready. There is a meadow in Michigan, inside the recovery zone for Kirtland's warbler, where wildlife managers spent years trapping and removing cowbirds to give warbler nests a window of safety. The difference in warbler fledgling rates between managed and unmanaged zones was stark enough that active cowbird removal became a conservation tool, written into recovery plans, funded, and repeated annually. What makes this image worth holding is what it reveals about scale. The cowbird is not a predator. It does not kill the warbler. It simply lays an egg nearby, disappears, and the downstream consequence of that 40-second visit cascades through a population across decades. One behavior, repeating invisibly across a landscape, reshaping the numbers of every species around it without ever making direct contact with the damage it causes. The warbler in Kansas is still sitting. She will sit for 12 more days. She will feel both eggs beneath her with equal warmth, equal patience, equal commitment. When they hatch, she will feed what comes out of them with everything she has. She will exhaust herself. She will strip insects from stems for hours in every direction. She will do this for a chick that belongs to a bird she has never met, that will never return to see the result, that is already 3 counties away, laying another egg in another nest that looks completely normal from any distance. The cowbird did not break any law of nature. It found a gap in the way parenting works and built a species inside that gap. It is one of the most successful reproductive strategies on the continent, and it runs entirely on the labor, the trust, and the biological blindness of every bird willing to sit quietly on an egg that isn't theirs. If you want to keep finding stories where the natural world is stranger than it looks, subscribe. There's no shortage of them.